If you've checked out Tiger King on Netflix, you might walk away from the series having a tiny bit of sympathy for the show's main character, Joe Exotic. Despite the documentary series detailing his illegal and immoral actions, you might still find a bit of love for Joe. And not only that, but you might also be finding yourself hating his rival throughout the show, Carole Baskin. The debate on whether or not Carole killed her husband has spawned tons of memes, parody, and even a potential series. So even though Joe Exotic is obviously a bad person, the audience still finds a way to support him, even going so far as to create GoFundMe pages and Change.org petitions demanding that Joe Exotic should be set free from prison. Throughout the show, we find out about him killing tigers, threatening to kill people, potentially burning down his own recording studio, and a ton of other immoral actions. And for Carole Baskin, the audience does find out some bad stuff about her, sure. Like the ridiculous amount of proof with her potentially killing her husband, and the fact that she took every penny away from Joe, including his parents' house. But the amount of horrible things Carole did compared to Joe aren't even close to adding up. So why do we like Joe Exotic but hate Carole Baskin? First, let's set the scene on why Joe Exotic might be a villain. He abuses animals, he profits off of an endangered species, he doesn't pay his employees a living wage, he hired someone to kill Carole Baskin, allegedly, and he may have burned down his own recording studio, killing several alligators in the process. Not to mention he's clearly a manipulative egomaniac, which is apparent from just the first couple episodes of the series. But the show doesn't just paint him out to be a white trash criminal. Tiger King does its best to balance Joe out to make him an anti-hero of sorts. During the show, there's glimpses of Joe being a decent person. He cooks Thanksgiving meals for his community, he appears to be loving to his husbands, and there are times where he seems to have some sort of regret about his life decisions. But just with these facts presented, it's not enough for us to fall in love with him. But regardless, the audience does, so why? It's no secret that if it were nearly any other show, Joe Exotic would be a bona fide villain. But Tiger King is special, and that's because Joe and the things he does don't exist in a perfect world. Joe's actions are happening in a world where everyone is a villain. Doc Antle, Jeff Lowe, Carole Baskin, John Finley, and every other character on the show either does something illegal, immoral, or just straight up weird. The only somewhat redeemable characters are a few of the people who work at the GW Zoo. But remember, they are still working at a zoo where they keep tigers and other animals captive, so they're far from perfect. So Tiger King sets up a show where every character is a villain. Now, when we see this and we see all the things that Joe does, it lessens the impact that they have. Joe is honest about him being a bad guy, compared to Carole, who tries to act like she's Mother Teresa. The audience can see that Joe is at least trying to be authentic. Whether he's doing it for the cameras is meant to be seen, but regardless of that, Joe is presented as someone with authenticity. Someone who owns his faults, mistakes, and wrongdoings. This is completely opposite from Carole, who is constantly presented as the victim of Joe. She never addresses anything she does wrong, or the mistakes that she's made. She presents herself as someone who's trying to save tigers, and gets abused, threatened, and harassed for doing so. Something that also helps us sympathize with Joe is that he's the main character, and we get to spend more time with him than anyone else. Not only that, but when we watch a show, we're typically watching it for pleasure, and to the viewer, Joe Exotic isn't a real person that exists in our daily lives. He's a TV character and a source of entertainment. And Carole is seen as a villain since she's the only one who tries and successfully stops Joe, and in turn, the audience's entertainment. Rooting for a bad guy or anti-hero is nothing new. It became popularized with Sopranos and has been happening ever since. We see it with Breaking Bad, The Joker, and now Tiger King. And even if something like this is real, it's still crazier than anything else you'll see on a typical TV show. So why should we be treating it any differently? If you find yourself rooting for Joe Exotic, don't think of yourself as a terrible person, even if you are supporting one. After all, Tiger King is a television show, and although it's a documentary, the characters it presents are at times more unrealistic and crazier than anything else you'd actually see on TV.